It's a great privilege to be with you here this evening. It has been a bit difficult for me though, I have to say. We arrived here at 4:30 and since then I've been watching everyone else drinking beer and wine while I've had to drink coffee. As I said to Elaine, who in every other way has organized this amazingly, I said to Elaine, it is the audience who should be drinking coffee, not the speakers. You're the ones who have to keep awake. I must just say as well that my wife is in the audience tonight, and so I have to tell the truth, I'm afraid. So the talk won't be as entertaining as it was going to be. When I was first asked to speak about success and leadership, my first response was to scream. And that wasn't with delight, that was with panic. I mean, where on earth was I going to find something to say about success and leadership? After all, we live in a world, in an age of calamity, political calamity, financial and economic calamity, social calamity, environmental calamity. And when I look at that, I think to myself, look how depressed this makes people all over the world. Just look at the worried looks on people's faces. It seems like the media is trying to depress us all the time. Not much success and leadership there. And if you don't believe me about this depression being a serious problem, do you know that the Gallup organization discovered recently that in the United States, depression and disengagement at work costs the US economy $350 billion a year. So as I say, not much success and leadership there. When I looked at my own life, it only increased my disquietude because I grew up in a land of plenty where most people had next to nothing. I started my working life teaching history to bright-eyed young men who were then plucked out of school to fight a savage war that no one even understood, and for a lost cause. And the more the information comes out, and I've been reading documents sent to me from Zimbabwe and South Africa recently, and it just dismays me that this terrible damage was done in the lives of so many people, black and white. I then changed my career and I spent probably far too many years in an industry where people threw obscene sums of money at us for coming up with the inanities that seem to titillate the modern consumer. And my own rise to the giddy heights of creative director, I'm ashamed to say, in part was fueled by no-holds-barred corporate politics. And, you know, when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, you don't often like what you see. Finally, I decided to start my own business as a corporate coach and speaker. But I found that, to my horror, I didn't actually believe any of the management fads and quick fix solutions that seem to fuel that whole industry. You know, they say, we just wave a magic wand with a simple template, we can make you a Napoleon of industry overnight. And I know it's just not true. They don't have simple solutions, and none of the things they are trying to solve are simple anyway. It's really difficult. I'll give you an example. widespread belief in our society that the key to business success is marketing. And I understand marketing as blowing your trumpet as loud as you can on television, radio, through the social media, telling everyone how wonderful you are. But that doesn't actually work, because the strength of a brand depends on the strength of the corporate culture. In other words, it depends on what your people are like in the workplace, especially under pressure, which they are under all the time here. And to be perfectly honest, when I see the damage done in the lives of people, I begin to wonder if anyone even understands what success and leadership are all about. I, 15, 20 years ago, worked for a guy who was, in worldly terms, one of the most successful businessmen you could ever imagine. He actually built an advertising agency from scratch, from nothing, to become in 3 years the most profitable agency in Australasia. He did it in 3 years. I've never met anyone who knows more about retail than this guy did. And people skills, his people skills were impeccable. The trouble is, he used them very selectively, and only when it suited him. He was the very worst leader I have ever encountered, because for all his impressive credentials, he was constantly doing enormous damage in the lives of the people who looked to him for leadership. I remember catching up with one of my colleagues some years after she left the agency. And she was a very, very capable woman. And she was working in another agency. But she told me that she was still, 5 years later, unable to make a business presentation. Can you imagine a senior account director unable to make a business presentation because she had endured such bullying at the hands of this man? He exemplified for me everything that the world believes about business, that to succeed in business you've got to be underhand and ruthless. And again, if you don't believe me, I got some figures very recently, over the last couple of weeks, that in the United States and Canada, and this was a very large sample in the survey, 56% of MBA candidates cheat in their exams. And often with the collusion of their lecturers and teachers, because they believe that's what they're going to have to do when they get into the business world. Now, for all this negative data that I've given you, I'm not a cynic. I'm not at all a cynic. And in actual fact, the only thing I insist on really is that the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality, to tell the truth to himself, to other people, to his customers, to his people above all, and to the shareholders, and to the community at large. So how do I then measure my success in leadership in a life that has been rocked by so much change? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from a guy who's now about 55 years old. This is going to date me, I'm afraid. He's about 55 years old, and 10 years ago, he was forced to leave Zimbabwe as a refugee. White guy. And he felt at his age uncomfortable with the idea of trying to make it in the first world, so instead of going to to Europe or America or Australia like many of his fellows have done. He emigrated north to Zambia. 10 years later, he owns a very successful equipment hire company in Lusaka in Zambia, and he has built a really good life for himself and his family. He happened to read an article I wrote on a university School of Business website on leadership, and he wrote this email to me. And he said, "My first impression of your article was how many of the ideas and guidelines were foundations drilled into us at Gifford High School. How character would count in life. To be a leader who is wise in all things. To be a wholesome member of society, geared around the greater good of all. In your article, I recognize the man who taught me history in 1969. I'm pleased to say, it's my great joy to receive emails of this type from all over the world on a regular basis. As I say, from guys in their 50s, it's a bit depressing when your pupils are 58 years old. People tend to guess your own age fairly easily. But I get emails in this line from Australia, United States, Canada, Britain, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, United Arab Emirates. I guess I'm fortunate because of the Rhodesian diaspora going all over the world, almost like the Israelites. I'm also fortunate in that the content and tone of a lot of the messages and the feedback I get from my leadership program are much the same as this. And for example, I'll give you a short message that I received from a very highly qualified scientist at a major research facility here in New Zealand. And he said this: "I was skeptical, but the program was extremely beneficial, not just for my professional development, but also my personal life. I now realize the importance of a positive attitude and integrity and the detrimental effects of cynicism." The good thing is that my book is also eliciting the same kind of feedback from people who read it. And I have to say that I feel very humbled by the fact that I feel humbled by the grace that has given me, that has taken me from being a teacher, fighting a war, to a long career in advertising and marketing, all the way back to teaching, because teaching is what I do on my leadership program. And that a message about integrity and truth should have been entrusted to as flawed a personality as I am is mysterious indeed. And I have to say, I only began to understand it when I became a Catholic 20 years ago. I finally understood the life-transforming power of what I'd been wrestling with for most of my life. It's quite ironic, really, that a strongly anti-Catholic Methodist, strongly anti-Catholic, should suddenly be forced to rethink his faith because he discovers quite inadvertently that 9 of his 10 favorite authors are Roman Catholics. This shattered me, but they actually made sense for me of what I've been wrestling with for so long. People like Chesterton and Newman. And the moment of illumination about success and leadership came at a very odd time in my life. My career wasn't going well. I was into my 50s, and advertising as a young person's game, and I managed to get a job. It was the last agency I ever worked for. They took me on basically as a hat writer. It was a sweatshop. And in this position, shorn of all prestige and authority, I suddenly found that I wielded more influence in the lives of people and brought about more fruitful results in the lives of others than I'd ever done in my life. And the reason for that was the strongly Catholic imperative to help others to succeed and flourish. You see, once I started my new business, and as I say, I couldn't agree with any of the management fads and the quick fix solutions, I quickly came to realize in the leadership program that I had to define leadership. You'll find literally thousands of leadership books out there that refuse to define leadership. And they say, well, we all define it for ourselves. Very postmodern. We all define it for ourselves. Leadership for you is not necessarily the same as leadership for him. I couldn't buy that because I don't see how you can carry on a conversation with anyone about anything unless you can define what you're talking about. And so the message I tried to get across on my leadership program is as simple as this. When you talk about leadership, leadership inspires people to be the best they can be in mutual pursuit of a better life for everyone. And that should happen in homes, in schools, in workplaces, and in the wider community. You see, I discovered that leadership was more about your character, the content of your character, than it was about whatever skills you might have. Leadership is a moral category. It's not an intellectual category. That's why anyone can become a leader. In trying to come up with an analogy for the dynamics of moral choices, C.S. Lewis came up with this brilliant idea of comparing ethics with a fleet of ships. And he said that all the ships must obviously avoid collisions, and that equates to social ethics. The next rule is that all the ships must stay ship-shape and avoid sinking, and that equates to personal virtue. And finally, all the ships must know where they are meant to be going, and that equates to your ultimate purpose in life. Now, in our world today, there's plenty of guidance on the first one. There's next to nothing on the second one. And on the third one, it's almost ignored. And when it isn't ignored, it is ridiculed. And that is the problem. That is why success and leadership are so scarce in our world today. And that's the cross we have to bear as Catholics. You see, the science and technology will keep changing. We know that the advance of science and technology keeps accelerating. And after listening to Andrew, well, there's finally hope for my arthritic hands. Material conditions will keep changing. Material conditions are vastly different today to what they were just 5 years ago. Vastly different. Society and culture, they always change, and they will keep changing. But human nature, and the conditions of human flourishing will never change. And nothing speaks to those issues with greater power than the Catholic faith. We are given the greatest gift of all in terms of success and leadership. And we are told by our Lord to use it and to share it with others. That is the secret of success. And that's the key to effective leadership. And we are known by our fruits.